Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer 1745 here with my continuing playthrough of Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 8.52 here. So we're continuing our attacks here in Italy. We've increased the war a little bit by bringing the Italian Social Republic into the war. And some reinforcements coming in right now to Italy. Okay, we're gonna let that go. Recon. Okay, there we are. Okay, Alexandria is just too far away, so we're gonna switch over here to Eisenhower's command for them. Got that. Now let's build a couple more medium bomber air wings. And that is side shield armor. Okay. Sloped armor. Well, I guess the British could do that. And actually they did have some sloped armor. Some of the Crusader tanks, turrets particularly, heavily sloped. Any transports up here yet? No, I don't think so. Oh, they are good. Okay, who's in good enough shape to head out already? Okay, we have the whole Canadian Corps, so let's... no, hold it. Everybody on board. I know, I think the Canadian Corps mainly fought in northern France, part of the D-Day operations, but hey, we can send them down to... yeah, Guard Infantry Brigade. And these guys. That looks good. Okay, let's send these guys too. And it's some time still before we are going to be seeing sometime in 1944, D-Day. The way it's scripted, it could happen along this coast here. Though this is the heavily weighted event, most likely to happen there. And these guys, yes, are here already. Okay. I'll send you back. Be able to pick up more units once you're there. Okay, the Gurkhas, they'll be useful there. Well, the mountain troops are not Gurkhas. Don't want you to get stuck in that battle. Okay, amphibious ship defenses, that's good. That's... I'm going to stop that and shift that over to artillery. We want to get out of artillery. Well, up to date. I'm going to go for another armored division. Rest. Give them a break. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. Lost some transports up here. Well, at least they were empty, I guess. Troops. I can afford to lose some of those light transports, but did we lose any to damage? Obviously, well, we could lose to air. No, okay. We lost some of those, but expensive forces are just fine. Okay. Yeah, we're gonna let that go. Okay, Operation Chastise. The Dam Buster Raid. Ah, yes. I forgot the name of that, but I know, of course, the Dam Buster Raid. You're probably all familiar with it. There's a very good movie about it. I think it was made back in the early 60s. What are they? You know, we use, and unfortunately it's missing in Hearts of Iron 4, though it's not a major heartburn. And I'll tell you flat out the reason why it's removed is because for most of the majors, it's not a driving, within this system, it's not a driving force for the war. Energy is what I'm talking about. Germany had plenty of coal. I don't know if it's still mining coal today. Britain still has plenty of coal, though it shut down virtually almost all of its coal mines. Partially over, well, combination of lack of modernization and high, expensive unionization that allowed for cheaper foreign coal to be in. Now, some of the cheaper foreign coal can be because of modernization or unsafe conditions in the third world. Cheap labor, unsafe conditions competing with it. But it's if you modernize, you don't overly you don't pay too much for your labor internally. And then also partially it's because of modern eco stuff. Yeah, hey, I don't want 19th century soot-filled cities either. This is, they always, oh, you want to go back to whatever evil time period in the past and claim that that's what we want. No, but we also don't want to be overly regulated to the point of stupidity either. There's a happy medium in there, but that's part of the reason. So, because I don't think there's such, I really don't quite honestly think that there's a idea of man caused global warming. I don't believe that at all. Oh, sure. Take an industrial city around Britain in the winter and have all of the heat going off. I'm sure it's slightly warmer in that city, but I don't think it's an appreciable regional, Greater Britain or whatever warming because of man. I'm sorry, I just don't believe in it. I'm not saying there isn't shifts, and I know there has been shifts. There's the classical era, the Roman Empire era was warmer than on average than it is today. There was the after the Dark Ages, there was the sort of high medieval warming period that it was warmer than it is today. So it's gone up and down. I'm not arguing that it isn't. I'm just saying man-powered, man-caused is not a thing, I don't believe. We'd have to start setting off lots and lots of nukes. And I do believe that we put back in the cold era of the 19th century, we put a lot more regionally contaminants, cooling element or heating elements than we are today in places like Britain. And Britain has plenty of coal. Germany has plenty of coal. At least at this time it did. Its problem with getting coal was the extraction process, meaning the amount of labor, the amount of mines, so that you can do more. And of course you have other resources like dams in Germany, dams in Norway that were producing electricity. So it has been removed from the game because it didn't affect command decisions. Who to invade. You may decide to invade Romania for its oil, or drive to the the Caucasus to get its oil. No major power, and with the maybe exception of Japan, but it did have a fair amount of coal in Manchukuo, and that's about the only one I can think of that may be driving decisions to get coal, or however you want, energy, however you want to call it, as a command decision in this. So it's only Japan. I still sort of kind of miss it, but they're right in that it doesn't drive command decisions. I just sort of like thoroughness and completeness to a game, and which of course you can do things like the Dam Buster raid and dramatically reduce the amount of energy available, as well as whether it's strikes or whether it's manpower to the mines or to the front lines or whatever. There are things that I could play with Maybe, again, nothing to the level that it's going to cause a real shortage in it. But here we're looking at a case now. So the power plants that were the hydroelectrical power plants that were fed via these dams were a critical element in supplying energy in this region. Taking them out will obviously shut down everything associated with them power-wise until they shift things over to a different power plant, which may be a matter of hours. Okay, I don't know, because there were in the region coal-fired power plants, but this did additional things. It flooded a great part of the Ruhr, which I'm sure killed people, took out factories. Some very well may have been very rebuildable. So that is a definite benefit for stopping the German war effort. So it did a lot of collateral damage, more than just take down this power plant or power plants associated with it. And obviously the system was set up to need to utilize the factories here. Now, if you were to shut down electricity to civilian homes and non-essential needs in the region, you can shift more electric power to other factories that need it. But for a one raid off kind of thing, specialty situation, it had a very big effect on its on the region where it happened. So and it potentially has, if there's coal mines down below it, to flood those out. And yeah, you can pump the water out, but it takes a lot of effort to do so, and time and disruption to your production. So successfully doing that, which they did, really messed up Germans' production. And so this is one thing, whenever you look at mid to late war German production and want to do it for a game like Hearts of Iron, in which you're trying to mimic history, you have to balance it between what happened versus what would have happened had the various bombing damages not have happened. Because we can easily, obviously, play a game here that if you're playing as Germany, you've already invaded Britain and taken Britain. We fought off a sea lion invasion earlier on in this series. Had that won, obviously Germany would not be facing any bombing, except for what had very few strategic Soviet bombers. And obviously, as they were pushed more and more east, they lost the ability to effectively strike at Germany. Oh, sure, you could, they had some long enough range ones, I do believe, that even from this level of the front could easily make it to Berlin, but we're talking relatively handfuls of bombers needing night attacks, and they weren't nearly as precise as even the British were. So the Soviets could do some, but not enough to affect it. So if you're trying to mimic the actual conditions based upon the war and controlling such territories, yes, but it's obviously very changeable. Plus the idea that, hey, Germany could have made different decisions for air power usage and limited the bombing effects. So you have all of that played into it, and generally, especially in this 43 period, you see a dramatic expansion in German production. Of course, Speer wants to take credit for a lot of it. He does have a certain amount of credit for streamlining some of the production line, getting all that in order, getting that set up. He does have a fair amount to do with it. That's why I give whether in any version of Thierry he is a a very beneficial person to have in charge of your war production. But there are other reasons. Some of them are simply going from, a 9 to 5, 5 days a week factory production to 7 days a week, 2 or 3 shifts a day, depending on how long the shifts and what they were running. So they were just simply expanding their, what one factory could do by not increasing the factory size or increasing the number of tools in the factory, but by simply running more shifts through them. And that doesn't take a Speer or anybody of even moderate intelligence. It's just the decision that, we're going to train up manpower and get it going and get the factories really under full total war conditions and not pre-war or early war conditions. And if you've watched my German series, and I've talked about some of those stuff. So you have to, so even with all the damage at this time in 43, production was expanding considerably. But there were major setbacks because sometimes a particular factory, one that's popping to mind was, I forget the model number, the Germans built a version of the Mosquito fighter. It was a wooden plane, twin engine, supposedly pretty good, sort of fighter bomber type thing, potentially a good replacement for the the Messerschmitt 110 type aircraft. Germany did have problems with maintaining enough production for aircraft engines. Some of that was, again, aircraft engine factories being destroyed, but some of that was just early on. That's why the Focke-Wulf 190 happened, basically, is it was a design utilizing radial engines instead of inline engines, and they were sort of, maxed out their inline engine production at 1939, 1940, that they currently had, but they also had factories set up to make radial engines, which is a different sort of process, and they were on, the transports and other aircraft, but they could easily, again, by adding shifts and such, produce more of those engines types. So that's why it's obviously a different engine, but that type of stuff for the Focke-Wulf 190. So that's why they decided to have two, instead of just one model, they decided to have two basic production models of fighters because of the different engine needs. So there was a sort of max engine availability, but there was also, which I, here are just rare materials there, they're going into aluminum usage and other critical things. And so if you have an aircraft that's mainly built out of wooden fabric and it's a very modern sort of an effective aircraft, you're not using very much of aluminum, it helps out tremendously. I don't think they've modeled that well. I haven't really looked at if anybody's, maybe Black Ice has started to do it, specialty fighters that need very little aluminum. So the Germans were working on that and had produced a few prototype aircraft, but I don't think it was any specific, like a Dam Busters raid, but they raided the factory and killed the people who knew and killed all known or destroyed all known formulas for the glue to glue the wood together, because you had to glue the wood, enough of the wood together. It wasn't effectively being held, because it's also part of it's not just gluing two pieces of wood together. It was also, I believe, a laminate situation in which you're using layers of wood with the grain going different ways, so it was strong but flexible, that you needed to be able to do it at the stresses to make a high performance aircraft, and you weren't just able to use furniture. You could use furniture production facilities, but it wasn't just making a standard chair leg out of a solid piece of wood that would then have the performance capabilities with being as lightweight as you needed to it. So it was sort of the glue to glue laminations together as much as glue the different pieces together. So I think a lot of that also had either screws or whatever. So that, and it's sort of shocking to me as a modern person. You mean they didn't have the formula, registered, in a vault or whatever in Berlin? It was just at the production factory for the early prototypes, and when that got burnt down, they didn't have the glue formula anymore, so they basically undid the program. Obviously destroying the factory was destroying some of the production facilities, I'm sure hurt, but I don't think they particularly knocked out in that raid the engine production. And as I said, once you get the sort of the jigs and whatever to the forms to how to, when you're doing the lamination, they would put the wood in and then put it in a form that would both press together the layers of the wood, but also in the shapes that they wanted to, and then let it all dry, and so it would then come out. Once you get those basic jigs done, you can pass them out to various furniture manufacturing type facilities that they may be doing something for the war effort, but they're not doing anything critical for the war effort. That they could get into production and have a dispersed production element, but without that glue, it couldn't go forward. So obviously, that's a sort of a golden BB, if you will, of a bombing raid as well. Just happens to get the right spot to kill it. But so you have to look into that when you're trying to model what could reasonably have happened for these games, because you can go, hey, we have it's a Hearts of Iron Forks. That's what I'm sort of thinking in now, is more and more, tech tree, especially for German wooden aircraft, and then have if you want to have it at an 80% chance that it gets destroyed and you won't be able to have it, or 20% that you can, or whether you just want to go, I don't care, I just want to be able to have it. We're going to be more careful with our formulas, or whatever you want to do, call it that way. So you can do it sort of historically, what ifs, but our percentage was, and so you can design all that in to see that happen. So you have to do that. Okay, so let's see. United Kingdom building equipment. We lose 5 in descent, lose 500. Bomber establish. Commander reports for duty. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. Outlaw the Communist Party. Okay. Today Parliament will consider last week's proposal for outlawing... Sort of jump over there. Oh, no, I was in line. I started reading it. Royal what? The Air Force? No. Outlawing the Communist Party, made by members of Parliament, made by a member of Parliament known for his conservatism. The tendencies are, comments our political specialists, that this proposal will fail because too few members really saw or really want to limit the freedom of speech to this degree. Okay. Give your support. Communist loses organization, popularity, revolutionary loses that. Oppose this kind of communism. Gains neutrality. Well, politics. Okay. Yeah, I'm for getting rid of the Communist Party here. Outlawing it. Now, I know there are a few people that have watched the channel, and I really appreciate that you still do, that have leftist and socialist tendencies. Now, I don't think I've ever really seriously advocated violently invading shall we say, democratic socialist countries of my life. And so if you're looking at that, or you're looking at like the British Labour Party, I think those democratic socialist parties and the Labour Party want to eventually, someday, under the right conditions, once they convince and molded and shaped, and the Fabian socialists, the wolf in sheep's clothing, gone through, they want an eventual, but through a sort of consensual mode of a communist state that is maybe not a totalitarian state, though, but if you look at George Bernard Shaw, what do you call a state that puts people to death in death camps? but a totalitarian state. And George Bernard Shaw was a big advocate, supporter, founder, I believe, of the Fabian Socialist Society. So before the Nazis started their first death camp. Let me say this again. Before the Nazis started their first death camp. Not their first concentration camp, but their first death camp. Okay? Before they did that, before the Nazis ever had a death camp, before they ever, and they never publicly in any sort of news release, there was never, and I defy you, and I don't speak the German, so if you want to point to it, I would then have to have some trusted person that I know that speaks German listen to it. But in a single speech of Adolf Hitler or Himmler or anybody else on any film ever publicly said that they were for a death camp of Jews or anybody else. They tried to keep it as to whatever degree hidden, okay? So let me say this again. Before there was a death camp, and they never publicly promoted the idea of death camps for any group of people, the Nazis. George Bernard Shaw, on a film which it also had a sound recording, publicly a primary mover in the Fabian Socialist Society. If you are unfamiliar with the Fabian Socialist Society, you should look it up. People that have spoken at their primary facility, that's still the same facility from the 1930s to this day, are people like the British Prime Minister of not Gordon Brown may have also, but the one that was friendly with Bush, Tony Blair spoke at this Fabian Socialist Society, in which there is a stained glass window, and I believe the stained glass window features George Bernard Shaw, but at this group, George Bernard Shaw on film with sound recordings advocated death camps for people, okay? And he says, and I'm coming very near to a quote here, and this is some of you people out there who support, it's just democratic socialism, it's just Bernie Sanders. Bullshit. But he said, they should ask you, sir or madam, what good do you provide to society? And he's like a yearly sort of test. And if you could not explain what good you did to society, what good you provided to society, you should be put to death. In a death camp, in a death factory, okay? He advocated that on camera. I think it was in the sound era, so it was in the 30s. So he advocated death camps for any person who could not prove a benefit to society. So if I'm a handicapped person in a wheelchair, well, do you do any good? Like if you're a writer, well then, hey, if you're a writer or you're a thinker, you're a publisher, you're contributing to society, so you'd be okay. No, I just sit at home and listen to the radio because I've been injured in a factory accident or because of a birth defect. He was advocating putting you in a death camp. Your quality of life, may have not been in any sort of pain or any sort of, euthanasia, wanting to stop a person who's in too much pain and putting them out of their misery. No, just, hey, you're confined in a wheelchair and you're incapable of doing anything useful in society. So we're going to put you in a death camp. And if you also, if you consumed more food than you produced, or value thereof in a factory, so obviously if you were producing cricket bats in England or something, obviously you're not producing food, but it's useful for the society, so you're producing more than you're consuming. So if you consumed under the Fabian Socialist George Bernard Shaw, who is still a publicly celebrated playwright in a good society. This is like saying, he was an extreme Nazi, but Himmler wrote such good plays, we still show his plays. No, this is what they do for these Fabian socialists. George Bernard Shaw, who advocated death camps very seriously. This wasn't tongue-in-cheek. This was very seriously on a sort of a newsreel. He's standing there alone in a garden, basically, making this for public news reels. Death camps for people who were useless or consumed more than they benefited society. Okay, so now I have never advocated, invading, say, Britain under the Labour government or Sweden under whatever, I don't know their Social Democratic Party, name. I've never advocated that. I've advocated opposing them, fighting them in the realm of ideas, the ballot box, maybe mass public demonstrations and those kinds of aggressive, I'm not saying deadly, but aggressive tactics against social democrats and other leftists that are going to push you down the communist path eventually. Some of the social democrats may only want a limited socialism. Okay, some of them do. But I can't tell which ones do or which ones don't. Some of the social democrats believe in communist revolutionaryism, but they don't believe it will work at that time in that society, whichever society in that time is, so that they want to go with a Fabian socialist model of pushing, grinding at the system, working it away over the generations until it's time for the violent revolution to spark up. So they're waiting for that. When it, and then when the time is right, they're going to come out with it. Others, they don't truly believe that it's a good thing to have that violent communist revolution. So they don't believe that that's ever good. They just want to promote communism through, through education, through propaganda, through, in essence, consensual societal movement towards that communism. And so long as you don't have the ability to do it in a consensual way, they won't move to the revolutionary side. But even if it is a consensual way, they will still use, once they're in majority power and able to push for it, they will still use force, like any other government. Hey, you don't pay your taxes. They're going to come with, now maybe a sheriff, which is sort of in the U.S. system, is the person who delivers, a court statement, but he has a gun on his hip, and he's putting serving you with something that's going to take away your house or take away some of your property for non-payment of your taxes, or they're going to serve your bank and forcibly take away your money. So they are using force, and if you use violence to oppose them taking away your house, they will use violence against you, so that they will, to some level, still use violence to achieve their socialist communist ways. But even with all that, I've still not advocated using, military violence or banning the idea of a social democratic party from existence. That is entirely different than, if you look at these two groups, Communist Party, who believes in that revolutionary violence, and this other one is the Revolutionary Socialist League. I presume that's a British party, and I don't know it. I'm presuming that's sort of the Trotskyite type model here. So if you are doing those groups, I fully believe in banning those organizations, because those are organizations that have, in countries like the Soviet Union, like in Germany during the Spartacus revolt in Berlin, in which they revolted and went into schools and massacred people because they wanted to do that, because they're advocating violent revolutionary actions, and often when they think the time is right will commit them. I am for the banning of these groups. It's like for banning ISIS or banning some other group that say, oh, well, we're a cannibalistic society. Well, you can't prove that we've ever eaten people. Well, would you if you could? Yeah, we would if we could. Would you? Well, as soon as we get the opportunity and see somebody that's alone and we can go get them, we're going to go eat them. We're not just waiting for it if it's legal. We're just waiting for the good opportunity. But can you prove it? No. Okay, well, I'm still going to ban your cannibalistic society if you have one. And that doesn't mean I'm putting everybody in jail. I'm just banning the society. And if we ever prove that you killed anybody and eaten them, you're going to either jail or be killed. But I'm going to ban your organization because you're a cannibalist organization and you believe and you advocate, and we believe that whenever you have the chance, you're going to kill and eat people. I'm going to ban that organization. This is, okay, I'm all for free speech. I'm not for speech that is advocating, or organization, and speech and organization are a different thing, but organizations that are advocating violent revolutionary overthrow of the system. That is different than saying we need to change the laws. We need to go vote and change the laws. This law is bad. That's a different thing. Even if you're advocating eventual communism, again, that social democratic thing, if all you're doing is advocating it being changed through the legal processes of the country, that is different than advocating it via communist revolutionary activities. And I don't believe, I believe any communist party who claims not to support that is only doing it because if they were to claim it, you could ban them. Meaning they truly believe it, they're just saying it so they don't get banned. So if you're, a communist party, whatever they say, I'm for banning it. So my political diatribe, haven't had one in a few episodes of any of them to this degree. But so these people are evil. Okay, the communists, I truly believe, are evil. They may think they're doing good, but I believe they're just as evil as the Nazis. Now, the Nazis are more evil based on race. They want to get rid of bad races, okay? That's a bad thing. Most people agree with that today, that that's a bad thing. But unfortunately, and more so in America now than it has been in the past, getting rid of people, killing people because of how much money they have or how much money they earned seems like an acceptable philosophy. Now, people wearing Che Guevara shirts, then to me it's a double hit. Che Guevara was a racist. You can look it up on Wikipedia or wherever. He was a racist. He hated black people. So he was that, and he was a communist. Obviously, he was a murderer too. We can look at that. But so people that you can walk around my city and not have eggs thrown at you or shouts, negative shouts thrown at you for wearing a Che Guevara shirt. But if you wear a Hitler shirt, again, I don't want to and not advocating somebody wear a Hitler shirt. But if you wore a Hitler shirt, you would have a lot of bad things happen to you during the day. I think, obviously Hitler created a lot more evil actions, but Che Guevara was responsible for, I think, tens of thousands of deaths. Not necessarily that he pulled the trigger on them. I mean, he pulled the trigger on hundreds of people. I mean, literally, he shot hundreds of people, I believe, personally, at different places and different times. Or was, if not him pulling the trigger, he was standing there and the firing squad right next to him was pulling the trigger. I'm talking that direct, not just sitting in some party headquarters. He was the executioner in Cuba for a while. And then he was also responsible some places in Africa as well. He worked for the Communist Revolution in Africa, though he was rather anti-black. I think that, he wasn't a Nazi and wanting to kill black people just because they were black, but he just thought they were inferior. So, Che Guevara, and I think probably in that sense, Che Guevara was more personally involved in more deaths than Hitler was, because Hitler was sort of squeamish and didn't go anywhere near the death camps and didn't like being around the death. I mean, obviously he ordered all of this stuff, but Che Guevara, so people can wear a Che Guevara shirt, so this is, my feelings on this stuff. So when you get into bed with these guys, so yeah, we're going to give support and reduce their confidence. Support. Okay, and yes, we'll take commands. And on that note, I think we're going to end this session. Sorry we didn't get further in the game this time. I got off on a political diatribe. A few of you out there who want to civilly debate this, I'll debate it with you. I'll be surprised if you want to stick up for Che Guevara or George Bernard Shaw's thoughts on, killing people. But to my knowledge, Che Guevara or George Bernard Shaw died unrepentant, changed in their views on these subjects. So, and the Fabian Socialist Society, to the best of my knowledge, has never disavowed, and it's an English society, so I don't know it in detail, but has never disavowed George Bernard Shaw's statements and made him a pariah. I mean, maybe if you were to ask them point blank, we don't support that, but they still support George Bernard Shaw. So I think they're lying to you, or whatever. Sort of like, well, Hitler was good because he fought communists. Well, yes, he fought communists, and that to me is a good thing. We just got done. But that doesn't mean Hitler's good. Hitler's still evil. Okay, evil can fight evil. And you don't have him as heroes of anti-communism. I can come up with some good heroes of anti-communism, and some of them took some drastic action now and again. But Hitler would never be one of my heroes of anti-communism, nor would any of the other Nazis be heroes of anti-communism for me. They're just other evil people that fought communism. Evil can fight evil. That doesn't mean you hold it up as something good. Okay, again, thanks so much for watching. Thanks for liking the videos. Please post your questions, comments, and suggestions. And like I say, you want to debate me on this in a civil way, I'll engage you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.